Alright, I'm not sure how many of you are gonna remember this, but a long while back in 2023, Blackmagic Design sent me their DaVinci Resolve speed editor and their big editor keyboard. And back then, I made a few videos about both of those, which were sponsored, but I had no restrictions on what I could say about them. So I tried to be as objective and as honest as possible, but still, at the time, I had only spent a short amount of time with them, so the videos that I made were more along the lines of first impressions more than anything else. And I would still recommend that you go and watch those because a lot of the stuff that I said then holds up pretty well even now. But one of the things that I said in a few of those videos back then was that out of the two editing panels, I saw myself using the speed editor a lot more long term. And I've been occasionally getting comments from people asking me if that is still the case, if I'm actually still using it and what my thoughts are about it now a year and some change later. And I can honestly say that I have in fact kept using the speed editor ever since I got it. I genuinely like it, and it's been a really helpful piece of gear for the right projects. So I thought it might be cool to talk about my long-term experience with it. Also, this video isn't sponsored by Blackmagic Design in any way. It does have a sponsor, and that's Artlist, but I'll talk about them a bit later. Alright, I want to start off by talking about the build quality and some of the technical aspects of it, because I know that if I was looking at a long-term review of any piece of gear, I would like to know if it can actually hold up to long-term use. And I am happy to say that the speed editor has held up really well ever since I got it. Back when I opened it for the first time, my impressions of how it was put together were already very good. It felt like it was a good quality product, and so far I've had no real complaints. I have gotten comments here and there from some people saying that the writing on some of the keycaps on their copies have rubbed off, but all of the keys on mine look pretty much exactly like they did when I took it out of the box. And I've used it a good amount. I've used it in the summer with sweatier hands. I've used it after putting on like moisturizers and hand creams, and not a single key has faded out. Aside from that, the mechanical switches for the keys themselves have been working perfectly fine. Nice and satisfying and clicky, just like back when I got it. Battery life has also been great on this thing. I haven't counted how many times I've needed to charge it since getting it, but it's definitely not a lot. And I've gone pretty long periods of time without using it, but then when I pick it back up, I'm always surprised that it's got a decent amount of charge left. One thing I can recommend for people having issues with battery life is if you're not using the speed editor, but it is somewhere around your computer or your laptop, maybe try turning off your Bluetooth, because the panel itself doesn't have a physical switch for you to turn it on and off, and sometimes that means that it can connect to Resolve even if you've got it stored away, and that can drain the battery on it without you realizing. Speaking of connectivity, that's also been pretty good for the most part. There have been a few times where I would have to connect it to my PC with a cable in order for it to be recognized by Resolve, but in the year and a few months that I've been using it, I've maybe had to do it 4 or 5 times tops, which is not that big of a deal. With all of that said, I personally feel like build quality wise, it has held up really well, and I haven't had any major issues with it, which I am hoping stays that way. But of course, beyond all of those things, another important aspect of it that I care about is the usability. Now, all the way back in my original video about the speed editor, I talked about how there was definitely a learning curve for a while after I started using it, and I do recommend checking out that video for more context about some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about in this one. Long story short, getting the speed editor was the only reason that I started using the cut page in Resolve. Up until that point, it was like this dark corner of the software that I never went into because it just felt confusing and not very comfortable to do anything in there with a normal mouse and keyboard combo. But after the speed editor, the more time I spent in the cut page, the more I started appreciating how good it can be when you actually use it with a piece of gear that's made specifically for it. And not only that, but it sort of feels like it structures my editing process a bit better when I can go through my rough cut or my selects in the cut page and then move into the edit page for the details. However, and I do have to be very clear about this, getting to a point where I was comfortable with it was not an overnight thing. Also, I can't not mention the jog wheel. It is great, it is smooth, it gives me a lot of fine control over what I'm doing, and there is just something that's so fun about going through footage with that instead of with a normal mouse. Plus, it makes for a great fidget toy even when you're not using the panel, so that is pretty sick. And in my original video, I talked about how I was trying an entirely new workflow, and I sort of compared it to my old one, but the more I've been editing with the speed editor, the more I've realized that the ideal workflow for me personally lands somewhere in between the one I had before getting the panel and the one that I had to learn after. And I really want to put emphasis on what I just said, because this next part is going to sound a little weird. I want to be completely transparent. I don't use the speed editor for absolutely every single project that I work on. In fact, I don't even use it for half of the projects I work on. If I had to give you a rough estimate, I would say that I use it for like 1/3 of the stuff that I work on. And I'll do my best to try and explain why that is. But first, I want to quickly mention that this video is sponsored by Artlist, and all the music you're hearing in this one is from them. I switched over to using Artlist as my main music licensing platform a while back, and I've been really happy with it so far. The quality and the variety of the music on there is great. I don't really have a preferred style of music to use in my videos, which means that I like using whatever genre fits the individual style of what I'm making or whatever I feel like at any point. And so far, I've always been able to find something that works for me on Artlist because they have a huge selection of songs. Aside from music, they've also got a massive library of sound effects, high quality stock footage. Not long ago, they introduced a section on their website where you can download creative LUTs. Full disclosure, this isn't something that I've used much in my own workflow, but when I saw that it was added, I did test out a few of the LUTs on there, and I thought they were really well made. But one of my favorite features from Artlist by far is their voiceover AI. I've used it in previous videos, and I'm actually using it right now during the pre-production for a project that I'm hopefully gonna be working on soon. It's been really helpful in testing out different versions for what I want the voiceover for the final piece to sound like, and that's also helped me figure out some of the shots that I need to get that are gonna go along with it. So if you've been thinking of making the switch to Artlist, now might be a good time to do it. And if you decide to go ahead and pick up a subscription, you can use my code below to get yourself 2 bonus months for free if you go for an annual plan. So yeah, thanks to Artlist for supporting the channel, and let's get back to it. So one thing I figured out after using the speed editor so far is that, in my opinion, it works best when I have a lot of footage to go through. That's not to say that I can't use it on projects with less footage, but I kind of feel like it doesn't really get to do what it's supposed to if all I'm doing is trimming 9 or 10 clips. If I'm working on something where I've only got a few B-roll clips, some A-roll, and a few graphics, I honestly find it quicker to just do all of the cutting right in the edit page, where I'm eventually gonna do most of the stuff that I need to do anyways. And for better or worse, 2/3 of the work that I do for clients is sort of like that. But if I gotta go through a ton of footage, it is infinitely easier to do it in the cut page using the source tape and the speed editor. To give a few examples, last year I filmed a few events for local businesses and corporate clients, and when I sat down to edit them, I used the speed editor because I had a lot of footage to cut down. Also, that FX30 video that I made not long ago, I also used the speed editor for that one because I had to go through pretty much everything that I've shot with that camera to find the clips that I wanted to use as B-roll. Again, tons of footage, but going through it in the cut page with the source tape and the jog wheel on the speed editor was so much easier and smoother than scrolling through it with a regular mouse. I'm currently working on a YouTube video about these cool lens effect filters that I picked up a while back, and I've also been using the speed editor to go through the B-roll for that as well. And if all goes to plan, I should be working on a few personal projects this year that will probably end up giving me a lot of footage to work with, and I will 100% use it for those. And all of those things make up that 1/3 of the projects that I said I use the speed editor for. But I honestly think that's completely fine. I don't really see a reason to force myself to use it for absolutely everything if there are ways to do what I need to do that work well without it. But that kind of leads me to a question that I keep getting from different people in slightly different ways of asking it, and everything I just explained makes it a little hard for me to give a clear answer. Every now and then I'll get people asking me if the speed editor is good for this type of videos or that type of videos. Some people want to know if they can use it for weddings, others want to know if it's good for gaming content, corporate interviews, and so on. And I usually just try to tell people the same thing that I talked about a second ago. I think it's not so much the type of videos that you're making as it is how much footage you're going to be working with. Because there's technically not a specific style of video that this is meant for. But I also realize that some people could misinterpret that as me saying that the speed editor is this one-size-fits-all solution for every video editor and everyone should pick it up, and that is just not the case. Let me be clear. I personally think the speed editor is great, but I also firmly believe that it is not for everyone for a few different reasons. First of all, like I mentioned, there is definitely a learning curve if you want to use it the way that it's meant to be used in the cut page, because that is how you would get the most out of it. But that is going to take time, and not everyone might want to spend time on doing that. And that's totally understandable. If you have found a way to get something done that works well, you might not want to set aside the time to learn a completely new way of doing that same thing. If it's not broken, you don't have a reason to fix it. And not only that, but there's always the matter of whether or not you're gonna like physically using it, because the panel is its own separate thing that you have to put somewhere, and then you have to get used to moving your hands to work on it, then back to your keyboard, then back to the panel. For a lot of people, that is gonna feel very unnatural and uncomfortable, and at first it was like that for me too, but I have always had a natural curiosity for trying out different pieces of gear, so I decided to just tank the adjustment period and eventually started liking it. To be totally honest, if viewers hadn't suggested that I try the speed editor a bunch of times, combined with Blackmagic offering to send me one, I'm not sure if I would have bought one for myself just by looking at reviews of it, because it looked kind of cool, yeah, but I wasn't sure if it was for me. I was skeptical, which is something that I mentioned in my original video checking it out. So a piece of advice I can give is, if you've seen a lot of videos of people talking about how much they like this thing, and you have never found yourself thinking that might be good for my own workflow, then maybe it's just not for you, and that's fine. Again, I personally really like it after spending a lot of time with it, but I can never recommend that you buy something just because other people have told you that they like it, because that doesn't mean that you will. Obviously, if you see use cases for it in your own work, then you can listen to other people sharing their experiences and see if you can find any similarities to what you need. But if you're wondering about picking it up just based on someone's recommendation, don't do that. It doesn't matter if it's me or anyone else. Alright, I also want to talk about something that I didn't like about the speed editor at first, and I still don't understand after all of this time. Blackmagic design team, why do we still not have the option to rebind the number keys in the middle of the speed editor? Like, I totally get that there are people out there who have a use for them as they are for multicam sequences. I get it, that's fine. But for all of the rest of us civilians, 1/3 of the panel doesn't do anything. Why? Like, I think I've used the actual multicam sequence editing functions of the speed editor a whopping total of 1 time in over a year of having it. Listen, if you're someone from the Blackmagic design team watching this, I'm gonna give you this one for free. For absolutely free. For all I care, the idea is yours and you can have the credit and the promotion. Please just make a push with your colleagues who are in charge of firmware updates and see if they can't do something about letting us rebind the number keys keys to other functions. People, myself included, have been asking for this for ages. And I know that I'm just a dumb YouTuber, but for the life of me, I cannot figure out a reason not to do it. I'm willing to bet good money, or at the very least, make an educated guess because I'm a starving artist and I do not own good money, that doing that will drive the sales numbers up for the speed editor by a lot because it would make it much more versatile. And not only that, but it would show that your company cares about the long-term support of these panels and are ready to add new features to them, to listen to feedback from the users to make their experience better. Or I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is some sort of massive technical limitation that is stopping you, but at least tell us that that's the case and what it is, and crush our dream straight up. Anyways, that's genuinely the only thing that I have as a complaint about the speed editor. And if by some miracle that changes, this thing instantly becomes 100 times more useful. But even with that one thing that I don't like about it, I still think that the speed editor is great. And knowing all I know about it now, I would absolutely buy it if I didn't already have it. Again, that is not a recommendation. That is just my personal feelings about it, but the way I see it, the value that I can get from this thing at the price that it's going for, especially considering there's also a Resolve Studio key that comes with it, is absolutely crazy. I've enjoyed using it a ton, even though I definitely don't use it as much as some other people do, but it's still been very helpful in the videos that I make. And like I said earlier, I am going to continue using it for a few projects that are already in the works, but beyond that, I'm pretty sure I'll keep using it for a long time after those are done as well. Alright, long video, but if you made it this far, I appreciate you sticking around. Drop any questions that you might have about the speed editor down below, and I will do my best to get back to you. But yeah, I think that's about it. See ya.